Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Badge Shenanigans. Many years ago, I worked at a company that did phone tech support for a particular piece of well-known business software. After outgrowing the building we'd been in, the company moved to an enormous warehouse building they'd renovated into offices and cube space. The new building had separate parking areas for visitors, of which we basically had none, and employees, who had to park in the rear. As part of the move, they got a new security crew, who had very specific ideas about access security. First, the entrances were keyed, so that you had to badge in. Use your ID to unlock the door. This included the visitor's entrance. Reception had to unlock the door for visitors. Second, all doors except for the front guest entrance and the rear employee's entrance were switched to exits only, and a never badge reader to unlock the door from the outside. Third, they forbade anyone from permitting drafting, aka allowing someone else to enter behind you so that you had to badge in to enter. Several people got write-ups for allowing people to come in after them, just to make that point. Fourth, you had to badge out to prime your badge so that you could badge in. For fire safety, you could exit by any door without badging out. But if you did, you couldn't unlock a door to re-enter and had to walk around to the visitor's entrance to have reception let you in. Because the front and rear entrances were around a quarter mile from each other, it was easy to waste 10 minutes getting back in the building if you forgot to badge out. And all of this way in around 100 degrees Fahrenheit weather for much of the summer. The explanation we were given was that they needed to know how many people were in the building in case it had to be evacuated. Of course, that information was on computers that were only accessible inside the building. After the first couple of days, during which I and nearly everyone I knew had locked themselves out at least once, I realized what I had to do. Starting on day 3, I'd enter the building and, immediately after getting through the doors, smack my badge against the exit reader to prime it to let me re-enter. Every time a coworker saw me entering the building, they'd ask me what I was doing, which I'd happily explain. Within a couple of weeks, I didn't see a single person coming through the doors who didn't swing around and smack their badge against the exit reader. And at the beginning of the next month, security sent out an email that they were no longer requiring exit badging. I like to believe that it was my doing. Although it's also possible that reception was sick and tired of having to deal with a lunch return rush and constantly letting the smokers back into the building. The next story is called Don't Spend Money on It. About 5 years ago, I found myself as a second shift supervisor at a small manufacturing plant. We had a line of 8 machines, with 4 others that could be added to the end of the line with a series of pipes and blowers. It all started when my boss, the plant manager, said, "I don't really read the reports that you send to me at the end of the day." He was trying to get a second, much larger plant running to make our small plant redundant and increase our capacity by around 8-fold. So he decided not to even be involved with the small plant. Okay, cool. Well, the company wasn't doing too hot. We had a ton of demand, but the orders were so large that we just didn't have the capacity to fill them. I, along with about 5 other people, worked 8 weeks straight from the beginning of July to the end of August, with only 2 days off during that 8 weeks. As a salaried employee at 30k a year and not eligible for overtime, I was not a happy camper. With the plant running around the clock, a lot of preventive maintenance was being neglected. I went to the plant manager and said, if we don't shut down for a day or 2 and replace the bearings and the rollers in the 6th machine in the line, they are going to freeze up. And the motor that turns those rollers is going to burn up. He said, just fix it, but don't spend any money. At the end of the night, I put in my daily report. I said that if the motor burned up, I would ask maintenance to pull an identical motor from one of the machines that were not connected to the current line configuration. That way we could finish this order. And to please respond if he wanted to do something different, and CC'd the head of maintenance on the email. I never heard back from him. After about a week, the bearings froze up and the motor quit working. I put my request into maintenance and they pulled the motor of the machine not being used and replaced it to finish a major order. The day we were finishing the major order that we had been working on for months, the plant manager walks up to me and the head of maintenance. He says, "You all need to hook those 4 extra machines up and start on the next order as soon as we get this one out the door." The maintenance head and I look at each other, then back at him, and I said, "Sorry, we can't do that. We don't have a motor to run the last machine. I sent you an email about it a few weeks ago and you never replied that you wanted to do something different. It is probably around $10,000 for another motor, and we can hook it up tomorrow if you overnight it. Well, plant manager blew our major gasket because we all knew the company was on its last legs. 4 days later, the CEO called a mandatory meeting at 4 o'clock on the last day of the pay period and let the entire staff go. I got unemployment and took it easy for a few months before starting over again and getting into data analytics. The third story is called Same Color. This was way back when I lived in a student dorm in a city in the Netherlands. This wasn't a US style dorm. Each student had their own room, but we shared a shower, a toilet and a kitchen. Between 16 people. Oh, joyful days. Anyhow, by the time I entered the flat, it was already 30 years old and falling to bits. So the student housing department decided to renovate the building, basically stripping it. We all got replacement rooms and a sum of money to shut off without making a fuss. So far, all good. Cue my neighbor's exit. By contract, we had to leave the room as we found it. That meant seeing to it that all the power plugs worked and filling up all the holes you'd made for hanging posters and lamps on the wall. It had become something of a tradition to perform the later task using toothpaste. It was mainly laziness, since proper toothpaste is a good deal more expensive than wall filler. Anywho, it's what most of us did. Except that my neighbor brushed her teeth with Parodontax, which uses a sort of off-pink, Adobe-ish color of paste, and stupidly used that brand to fill the holes in her wall. So come inspection time, the holes she had filled with it on our white wall stuck out like sore thumbs. After about a week, she received a letter stating that she needed to make sure the walls were uniformly the same color. Else, she would face a 1000 guilder, about 800 euros in today's money fine, plus the loss of her 300 guilder deposit, within 3 days. This was in spite of the fact that the rooms would be demolished shortly after, and that the student housing department was very lax when they actually had to do any repairs. After about 3 minutes of indignation, we threw together enough funds to visit the do-it-yourself store. We were armed with a tube of Parodontax toothpaste. We had a can of paint mix with exactly that color, returned and repainted the entire room, including everything in it in solid Parodontax pink. When the inspector showed up a week later, he just stood there flabbergasted while my neighbor shoved him his own letter in his face. The relevant sentence about uniformity was indicated in yellow marker. She never heard anything about it again. The last story is called Subjective Rules. It was just after 2000, and as I was working in IT, there had been a busy year leading up to the millennium. Now everyone was looking to get back to normal. The company had other plans for us and decided to make a third of the IT staff redundant. In my team of 12, this meant 4 of us. This wasn't really a problem, as even though I had just moved into IT a few years earlier, the job market was booming and getting a new job would be easy. This HR move was a bit of a surprise, as we were very busy. Lots of the routine projects had been put on hold, so lots of catching up. But whatever, they knew best. Redundancy with this company offered a month's salary per year of service, way over the legal minimum. They were offering me a year's salary tax-free, mostly to find a better paying job elsewhere. An offer that would be hard to say no to, but unfortunately they were not going to ask. The way redundancy works for this company in the UK is that all the occupants of the role are ranked by very carefully selected criteria, and the lowest ranked are goners. The way the criteria are selected is to make them very subjective and capable of withstanding any legal challenge that might lead to an industrial tribunal. If there was one thing HR hated above all, it was legal hassles. Criteria would be things like expected to be able to contribute well in other divisions of the company and other such evidence-free bollocks. Why this weird approach from HR? It isn't as daft as it may appear. When trying to reduce headcount, the options in the UK are natural wastage, offering early retirement, offering voluntary redundancy, or having compulsory redundancies. In a team role in IT, at this time, what tends to happen is that nobody is old enough to retire. And offering early retirement was actually expensive, as it was based on a generous company policy. Offering voluntary redundancy means the deadwood stays. Forcing a selection process stops the good people from leaving. No redundancy money, and allows getting rid of the poor performers. Or, at least, that was the plan. Anyway, my manager had been told he was being made redundant, which was a bit of a tactical error. He wasn't really adhering to the company line as strictly as he might have been had the circumstances been different. He gathered us together and asked who wanted to go. 4 of us, me included, volunteered, so all was good and everyone on the team was happy. My manager, maliciously complying with the ranking exercise, dully ranked us by the contrived criteria, but interpreted to our ends, not the company's. These rankings were passed to HR, processes were run, rules cried, oracles consulted, and ultimately decisions made. Lo and behold, the gang of 4 came bottom of the pack. Because of the extremely subjective nature of the criteria, nobody could prove the rankings were wrong. My manager then let the team know who was staying and who was going, as was right and proper, and we each got bye-bye loser or you're still on board letters from HR. That wasn't the end of it though. HR somehow tricked they were being stitched up by my manager. Comparing the people leaving with the people with the highest annual appraisal scores was an exact fit. HR went into recovery mode and tried briefly to revoke the redundancies. This would have been totally legal, except for one thing. It had been announced that we were bottom of the selection criteria. Continued employment would have been unthinkable, as we were declared least competent to do the job, and they still wanted to get rid of 1/3. If they had insisted, this would have been potentially constructive dismissal. Either for the gang of 4, in a weird backward way. This is when the employer makes life untenable for the employee, such as saying you are rubbish at your job and they want rid of you. Or if another 4 were selected, then obviously the process was flawed and they claim unfair dismissal, the company not complying with its own processes. Considering the entire rigmarole, particularly the selection criteria rules was designed to avoid legal hassles, they were painted into a corner and had to let the 4 of us go. So thanks manager, for playing the system so well to get the outcome the employees and not HR wanted. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.